Welcome, everyone. This is Glenda Dawson, your host for Cosmic Conversations on Tuesday. I just want to say thank you to everyone who supports us, who shares the podcast, and who also watches later um, on the website, on the Conscious Awakening Network website. And again, I want to explain to you there is no charge for this. You just go to the website, go to the Cosmic Conversations section, and sign up with just your name and an email. Um, Unfortunately, we're still trying to straighten that out, how some people misunderstood that there was payment needed, but there isn't. And we welcome anyone and everyone here on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 we start the show, 7 p.m. we open the meeting, and on Thursdays it's 9 p.m. So Phil Gruber starts it around 8:30, give or take. And so we could be set and ready by the time that the show starts. So tonight we have a wonderful guest. She is wise beyond her years, and she's very connected to and very spiritual. So tonight, let's say hello to Kara Goodwin. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here on Cosmic Conversations and to be with everybody and to have Susie's beautiful music before we started recording. It's really a joy to be here.
Yes, I know she plays great. Thank you, thank you. So, Kara, tell us about yourself and, how you got here and, what you're about.
Okay. So my name's Kara Goodwin and I'm a podcast host myself. So I have a podcast called Soul Elevation. I am the author of Your Authentic Awakening, a guide to everyday spiritual living. And I love to work with people in terms of their spiritual development, their spiritual evolution. Sacred geometry is really dear to me, and I utilize that quite a bit. I haven't done a lot of like teach. I've done a little bit of teaching. I have like one workshop that I've led about it, a multi-part workshop, but just understanding me as a person and as my spiritual journey, sacred geometry is always plays a big role for me personally. Um, I got into my spiritual work, my personal spiritual work several years ago. I was I come from a corporate perspective. I come from like mainstream was, I've got two kids and I have a husband and we were just I worked for blue chip companies, just kind of day to day, not questioning a lot of things. And my spiritual awakening began through just a lot of challenges that happened all at once, or seemingly all at once in a very short time. So it began with the suicide of my sister in law. And she was also one of my closest friends. 3 weeks after she died, our dog died. And then a few weeks after that, my stepdad had surgery on his brain stem. And that was quickly followed by my mother in law being hit by a motorbike as she crossed the street. And then my stepmom went into the ICU. She was having heart failure after having a heart virus for several years that she was managing very well. Suddenly went on a really rapid decline, ended up in the ICU, and had a heart transplant. And so all of that happened. I mentioned before we started recording that I had lived in Italy for several years. And so we were on an assignment for my husband's job. And all of that happened while I was there, while we were there. So my family's in America, my husband's family's in England, and we're in Italy. So we couldn't even really easily be with anybody as all of this was happening, which added another layer of heartache to all of that. So that was a really, really trying time. And I felt like the rug got pulled out from under me. You just start to not recognize or not even trust kind of what reality is, because I definitely got to the point where it seemed like every time the phone rang, it was bad news. And it almost became like an unfunny joke, because I'd see my phone ringing and it'd be just like a Tuesday afternoon. And it would, for example, I distinctly remember my phone started ringing in the middle of the day. It was my dad. And I was like, I don't even want to answer this, because every time someone calls me, I'm not ready to hear what they want to tell me. Because if it's bad news, like if it's normal news, you just text, right? So it's like if somebody's calling me and it's not like Sunday when I call my family, because I always had my times when I would call my family. Um, and then I would think, no, don't be silly, just answer the phone. And it just Gretchen's in the hospital, and we're in the ICU, and I just wanted to let you know, and you don't need to come home, but all this, and it was like, are you kidding me? Like it really would be like every time it would just be this tragic news. So through that really started to wake me up of in terms of life as I knew it. That really was the end of life as I knew it. And I'll breeze through some of the story because we could be here for a long time. But I found meditation. I felt that meditation would help me to cope with what was happening. But I really went to meditation from wanting to feel better approach rather than wanting to get spiritual. And honestly, when I first started meditating, I was actually learning from monks of a tradition, of more of a yogic tradition. And so they were teaching it in a spiritual way, but they also went into the science behind it. And that's really what I was looking for. But even though they were trying to teach it in a spiritual way, I was really like, I don't know about that, And I was approaching it really from that scientific perspective. And it was through engaging and creating a daily practice, being dedicated to it, and through that, eventually having my own experiences where I just relatively simple things, but perceiving light coming down my body, like starting up above where I didn't even know I could see inside when my eyes were closed, but like inside my head, but then perceiving this light coming down and it getting brighter and brighter and feeling this warmth. And it was I didn't know what to make of that. It felt supernatural, but I didn't have any idea what that could be. But it moved me to tears. And it was so powerful. And even though I didn't know what the meaning was of it, it was still meaningful for me, going through this kind of really difficult time. And then just feeling this, even though it showed up as light, it felt like some sort of presence. And so feeling that kind of support and protection and connection is the better word to say, um, particularly in that time. And there was this sense of, I don't know, like where everybody is with their spiritual journeys or how you got on your spiritual journey, but when, if your spiritual journey came later and you didn't necessarily always feel like you were putting effort or energy into cultivating that experience or cultivating that aspect of your life, for me, there was like a sense of unworthiness that was part of that experience too, where, maybe I would feel like, sure, maybe there is more out there. But me personally, I haven't been cultivating that connection. I've been kind of turning away from it. And so, who am I? Like, probably God exists, but I'm sure he has no idea that I'm here, that sort of thing. So, just feel like when I look back at that, the light, that was like the first encounter, if we even want to call it that. I'd say that loosely, but the first sort of supernatural experience that I had, and it felt so loving. And to feel that love and that support at that point in my life, on top of the unworthiness of like, I haven't really done anything to deserve this because I haven't really been stoking that flame all these years. So, um, but having that, that's an example of the types of inner experiences that I started having that started opening me up to like, oh, wait, there is something else going on here. And it is for me. It's for me too. And um, and so it's just been, an evolution in the years since then.
Mhm. Yes, I am sure it came with much of a surprise for you that you actually felt and saw the light and all that. Um, that is something that is a beautiful experience, and it also shows that you kept trying until you actually found something that you didn't even know you were looking for.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
so now you wrote this book. You're- Tell us about the book and what inspired you to get there.
The book is a combination of practical guidance. So it's your authentic awakening. So I'm focused on spiritual awakening and giving some step-by-step things that were really helpful for me to go deeper in my spiritual evolution. It also contains some mystical experiences that I've had. So the descending light that I was talking about that I had very early on was, there have been many things that have happened since then, and they've gotten more complicated and more they've gotten weirder.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, and I love the weird. So I'm like, all right, let's do this. That's great. But, it's in order to get to some of those things, you kind of have to lay the foundation of things like, well, what are we talking about when we talk about the quantum? What are we talking
Correct.
like what is vibration, frequency? How do they are those the same thing? So there's some of that too. Like this
Mm,
is what we just to lay the groundwork of different terms that are used and things like that.
mhm,
But I wanted to put in there some of those mystical experiences because there's the very practical side of developing a meditation practice, doing breath work, um, working with our traumas and working through the conditioning and how does this conditioning get built up? What's separating us from our higher self? Why do we want to connect? What benefit do we get when we connect? And so there are things that we can do that every day or
mhm.
regularly that help us with all of that. And then I think that it's fun and it's expansive for us to consider the more expansive experiences of consciousness that go beyond the Newtonian physical world that we experience all the time, where we start to move beyond the physical and and experience things beyond
Right.
our physical realm,
Mhm,
um, and some of those have really practical applications. So one of the things that I talk about is I think I've had like three different ways that time has appeared to me in those mystical states and those expanded states of consciousness. And I remember the first time that I saw time was
mhm,
how I was saying it. I was like, "Oh my God, I saw time. I saw how time works." And it was this amazing experience, and I'll explain how that was. But I really thought that I had seen time, that I had seen how time worked. And then a little while later, I saw it again, and it was totally different. And then I saw it again later after that, and it was totally different again. And I was like, oh, time works in a lot of ways, I guess. There are a lot of, I mean, I guess they're symbols
right.
maybe time has archetypes or something. I don't
Yeah, I'm sure. Gotta
know.
have something there.
Right. So it was just interesting because I think from a human brain perspective, we might think of things like I think of things even, in realms.
Right.
So, because I'll experience things and I'll go back to places that I'm familiar with, where it's like, oh yeah, this place, I've seen this place before, and it's not
Right.
really a place, but maybe it's a dimension, but it's got characteristics in it that I recognize and I remember that I've been there
Mhm.
before. But so I kind of thought that I got to one that was like where time is located or whatever. And then I was humbled to realize that it it's not quite like that. So, but
Well,
yeah,
the spiritual world, let's just leave it like that, has a real sense of humor.
I agree.
Just when you thought you have it, they answer. They're like, ha 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 ha. We're
Yes.
going to change the pieces. I mean,
Yes.
just to stir things up and just to get you to think more and open and awake, continue to awaken. Because
Yeah.
if you get there, then that's the destination. They
Yeah.
want you to expand more and more and more.
Right.
So, but that sense of humor sometimes,
Well, and sometimes, it's hilarious. Like I find it's really funny when you notice that it's actually all around you. And I know that we
yeah,
hear this a lot, like what you're seeking is within and but I see Susie in the rainforest,
yes,
she's in the jungle and the amount of times that I've been in a heightened state and then I am in nature
right,
and like I said, I'm really interested in sacred geometry. I draw a lot of sacred geometry. I look at sacred geometry a lot. I relate to like when I relate to energy and I harmonize energy and I'm working like that has that geometric component to me. Like when I am working with my energy, I'm working with geometry at the energetic level. And then I go out into nature in a heightened state, not when I'm like rushed and
right,
I'm, listening to a podcast or something, but when I'm like really, really present and it's such a joke. It's such a joke because it is geometry. It's all these things that you study on paper and these ratios and these angles and all of this, and you just look at a beautiful tree and a leaf and the mycelial network and it's just like, oh my God, it's all geometry. It's the phi ratio, it's the Fibonacci, it's this
Mm,
repeating, it's this beautiful, perfect symmetry that is just found everywhere. So it's like it's all through our body. It's through the proportions of our body I think it's hilarious, to be like, we're trying. I mean, for me, like trying with my brain to understand it and
right.
to get it at in different levels and layers. And then I'm like, and then, also you can just go into the forest and be surrounded by it and absorb it. And it's the same.
Right.
It's
Yes, yes,
very
yes.
funny.
It is. And talking about the forest and all that, it's very hard in right now, uh, the modern times. It's very different than the other, previous times where there was more nature around and people worked in nature all the time and was, so um how do we continue to align and nurture our alignment in the present times?
Yeah, that's a great point. We aren't most of us are not living right in nature where it's as easily accessible. So we do need to seek it out and prioritize it. I think that part of it is being intentional with how we spend our time. And so whether that is spending time in nature, having time that is not necessarily taken, where we can kind of freestyle our time. This is a challenge for me. I tend to be pretty, I tend to utilize my time very economically and efficiently. And it's hard for me to remember. It's yeah, it's just, my kids are still at home, and I've got my work that I'm doing, and it's just I have to prioritize some downtime. And I love meditation, so I always make time for meditation. I think that that's another huge way that we are able to get into that alignment, is spending time meditating. And it doesn't necessarily have to be as structured as that all the time.
Right.
So I love the just putting the phone down and meditate if you want to, but don't feel pressure to say, well, if I'm gonna not work, or if I'm gonna not watch TV or read a book or something, then I should meditate, or whatever
Right.
we tell ourselves. But the amount of time that we fill with scrolling, with
Hmm.
just, I was, both of my kids are at work right now, and my husband was playing pickleball tonight. And so before we met, I had dinner by myself, and I was like, oh, should I put on some music? Should I put on a podcast? And I was like, no, I'm going to eat, and I'm just going to be here, and I'm going to just listen and let my mind wander, cuz that that ability, or that willingness, just let the mind wander. That's one of the things with meditation, where meditation is a discipline. So you're really trying to catch your mind when it starts to wander.
Hmm.
And, in my opinion, meditation is even not so much about not thinking, especially if you're earlier in your meditation journey. So that pressure to like not think, I think, can overwhelm people. But noticing that we've started thinking and we're getting lost in thought, and then coming back and
Yes.
coming back to the moment. But outside of meditation, giving ourselves that space to just have the imagination go, let the thoughts, just what comes to mind, and what, I feel like that is also how we allow spirit to connect with us. But we have to make the space for it. One of the
Yes.
things that we want to be mindful of is that when we are getting communication from our soul, from our higher self, it's subtle. The communication that we have with God, with our higher self, it doesn't shout at us. I mean, it can in the terms of like if we're dealing with something, if you're having like a lot of people dying, or having accidents, or heart transplants, or whatever,
Hmm.
you could argue your higher self is screaming at you and saying,
Right.
and it that part of your life is done now. You're entering a new phase, and get the message. We want your attention now. And so that's, how it happened for me. But just in the everyday, typically when we want to connect, or we want to receive messages, we're not being hit over the head. It's subtle. And in order to receive those subtle messages, we have to make space, because when our life is noisy and we're moving from one thing to another, and we have an opportunity to have 15 minutes of quiet, but we're going, well, I should put some music on, or I should put a podcast on, or, you know, I should
Mhm.
do something with this time to maximize it while I'm eating, you know, rather than just let me just be present.
Yeah.
I'll let my mind wander. Let me, what, and without the pressure of, okay, I'm going to hear something. I'm going
Right.
to, okay, guides, this is when you're going to talk to me while I'm eating my burrito bowl. you know, this is what I want you to tell me. And,
Right.
but it's
Well,
the,
I
just
hear
allowing the
you.
subtlety.
Now that the weather is getting cooler, we have wood pellet stoves, and I just love to sit in the dark, watch the fire, and it's just so peaceful. And they do communicate and they do give you messages. Sometimes they do hit you over the head, but but it's allowing that moment to be there and present in that, and for you to be in that moment
Right.
without all this side stuff that goes on, and my grandkids upstairs running and all this other stuff. I'm just focusing on that fire. So
Yeah. Yeah.
very important for the soul. um so you were talking about the soul and all that. Why do you think that so many souls are disconnected at this moment?
Well, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, and it is a byproduct of modern living. We are, especially those of us in Western culture, we're encouraged to multitask. We're
Mhm,
encouraged to produce and to just we value that fast pace, and depending on where you live, sometimes faster than other places,
mhm,
but still, we are valuing that output and the throughput and the um, go go go. And I say that that's a byproduct of our modern living. I think a lot of us are tuned into the fact that there has been a deliberate um, there have been deliberate ways that society has been structured in order to create those conditions.
mhm,
And we were born into this. We were born into a society that's been structured that does not support our spiritual development. It's really designed for us to just be cogs in the wheel. And there's a detrimental effect of what that creates for us from a human experience.
mhm,
But we were born into families that were conditioned in the same way. One of the things, I was just talking to somebody who was bringing up, I hadn't quite heard about this, and then I heard it again, like right after she explained it, and I was like, oh my God, that's what Cheryl was talking about. Um, but I think it was like 1914, right before World War One, or right when World War One was starting. The way that schooling had been, the way that we had been schooled, was really much more creative, and it really nurtured us in a more well-rounded, creative way. And then when the war started, they really needed people who knew how to take orders and knew how to just do they knew how to answer the questions that they were tested on. So it was really confining to our thinking, and
mhm,
it drove how they taught us, because it was like, this is what we need you to know. We need you to know how to learn in this way that structures you psychologically so that you can, you know, make weapons or be, work in these factories. Like they needed workers
mhm.
that had a specific way of thinking. And that's how our school system became designed. And it continues that way. So we're not really taught how to think. We're taught how to answer, how to create tests. And I actually saw this for myself um, when we moved back from Italy, because my kids had been in a like a program. They weren't in American schooling, even though they were in an international school, but
Right.
the school, they didn't have tests. They weren't memorizing things. They
Mhm,
were they were doing applied learning. So they were
mhm.
learning about things, and then they were doing project work to illustrate their learning and to apply it.
Right.
And they would take several subjects and do projects on several subjects that they were learning at one time. And when we moved back, my son was in fifth grade, and he like bombed his first test. And he was in the gifted program, and he had sailed through school up until then.
Mhm,
And he was devastated. He did not know what to do with that, but he wasn't ready for a test. And because he hadn't been learning that way. And it was like, oh, The way to succeed in our schools is to memorize. You have to learn how to
Yep.
memorize. So what do they want me to know? Let me commit that to memory and let me regurgitate that. But we're not learning how to learn. You have to do that on your own when you're older. And I'm sure a lot of us who would be drawn to content like this, we sympathize with that
Yes.
because we have to learn all of this stuff that we're all attracted to in terms of the quantum. I see Quantum Doug put in here, when we were talking about time. Time is related to complex I equals square root of -1. But, like for a lot of us, we want to learn about quantum things. We're not necessarily learning that in our regular mainstream school system. Of course,
Right.
quantum scientists are, but a lot of us love that type of thing of what's happening, how does spirituality and science interconnect, or what is it that we're not being taught in our mainstream schools? Um, we have to do that on our own, and we have to figure out how to learn on
Hmm.
our own. And so that's one example. We grew up, we were born into that system. Our parents were born in that system. So our home lives were shaped by their experience. They were raised, we've got this familial line, we've got all this family trauma that's coming in, but the people who raised us had their limitations by how they were brought up too, and the society that they were
Exactly.
brought up in. And we all know we are not an enlightened society, and we have not been. I mean, at least as far as we know and are told, let's say,
Right.
we have not been enlightened society. So we're, um, from a mainstream perspective, we're limited in those ways. And of course, the media is not, this is why Conscious Awakening Network is such an important thing. And conversations like this are so important because our regular media is also it's limited, and there are agendas, there are absolute
Hmm.
agendas that are dictating what we're told in the programming
Hmm.
of the media. And so those types of things, they're deliberately not nurturing our infinite potential and our soul potential.
Yes.
And so that contributes to the fact that we're disconnected, because we have to recognize that there is this higher reality, there is a truer reality, and then we have to go and kind of in our own way navigate that, explore that, nurture that. But we can't just like turn on the TV and get the instructions like we can for how to overcome, whatever Skyrizi is supposed to heal. I don't one of those drug commercials that we hear. I always am hearing Skyrizi. I'm not sure what it does, but
I don't know either.
that commercial's on a lot. My husband loves football, so he has football on a lot, and we're always like, "Oh my God, not Skyrizi again."
Well, I honestly, I have a lot of Netflix, but I don't have regular TV anymore. I
Yeah.
couldn't handle it anymore. Um, it's because of that, because it's just such, you could tell the programming,
Mm-hmm.
underlying, and it's not so much what they say, it's read between the lines type of thing. And that's where you get the little codes that say, everybody's got to do this. And now even in schools, it's worse because they're teaching for those state tests or
Yeah.
those national tests. They're not teaching so the child learns per se. They're
Yeah.
teaching for the testing so they could continue to receive the funding.
Right.
And it's very hard. It was very hard for my kids because they were above that, and they're like, okay, but I already know this. Why will I have to learn this again?
I know.
And
It's really a tragedy. We're losing such an opportunity. I mean, just thinking of, like, I don't know if anybody's seen Caroline Corey's work with, there was a documentary she did a while ago called Superhuman.
Mm-hmm.
And she explores all of these different kind of like psi skills that are learned,
Mm-hmm.
like people with blindfolds who can see and they can like pass these tests about what am I holding up, what color is
Mm-hmm.
this, and all
Mm-hmm.
of this. Telepathy, remote viewing, all of these
Right.
things. And she's showing people who don't have exposure to it in some of these where they're learning very quickly, how to remote view or how to do these. And she's showing herself like changing the pH of some DNA, I think it was. And so, really remarkable things. It's showing the human potential.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, what are we spending our time? These precious years of these children where they're so malleable,
Mm-hmm.
and especially these little ones that are coming through right now. My goodness, like the whole other level, it feels like. So
Yes.
it's it's really like we're missing an opportunity, or is it something darker than that? But it's a shame, whatever way we look at it, that more we're not nurturing that and
Mm-hmm.
the abilities that we have. I mean, we really could, as a species, we really could propel into a whole other octave of
Mm-hmm.
ability. And like, again, looking at superhuman, for example, but and probably people who are listening to this experience these things on some level themselves, of telepathy and
Yes.
of healing, through just intention and manifestation and things like this, these things that, and I feel like it's just getting more and more powerful. And so it's like, gosh, if we were nurturing the truth of who we really are, we could
Mm-hmm.
just we could be at a whole other octave. So it's just I guess we can just be excited about what the future could hold, because I hope that we are, going in that direction. It might just feel really slow right now, but I don't know.
It's uh, it's moving at least.
Yeah.
So, um, what steps would you take, or would you say for someone to take to come into alignment with their true spiritual nature? Not just, I know meditation is one of them, but true meditation, not the one that you're like rushed and looking at the clock. Okay, 15 minutes. I promised myself 15 minutes. It's like I keep telling my students and my clients, don't make an appointment for 5 minutes. Make an appointment for 15. You give yourself, because you make an appointment with yourself for that time. And they're like, but I only have 5 minutes. I don't care. Make it for 15. You'll learn to then, wow, okay, I was able to do this, and I didn't feel the rush because I had the 15 minutes instead of
Yeah.
the five. So, but what other things would you suggest?
Yeah, for connecting deeper with the soul, with the spirit. Um, a lot of things come to mind. There are a lot of different ways that we can connect. Like you say, meditation would
Right.
be one of the first, and a lot of times people do feel like that's a little bit too much. I think a lot of people tell themselves they can't do it because they know that their mind is so
Mhm.
active, and I like to make sure that it's clear that everybody starts with a busy mind. We all
Mhm.
have we're all living in the modern world, and so and it's a training. It's
Right.
just like if you want to learn how to play piano,
Mhm.
you're unless you're a virtuoso, you're not going to sit down there and know how to play without being taught or practicing
Right.
or whatever. And it's the same with meditation. But I think because there is no instrument and you're just dealing with yourself, a lot of people have an unrealistic expectation that, oh, if only I just sat down for 15 minutes, that's all it takes. And it's like,
Mhm.
no, you actually need to understand where you start from, and
Mhm.
modern life is not conducive to a meditative state, and then utilize the tools and techniques that can really help to cut through that. One thing that can help with that, I would actually say, in opposition, another way to look at what you were saying with the 15 minutes versus the 5 minutes is that actually there can be something to be said for starting for a small amount of time and just, I even encourage people, if you've never done it before, just watch your breath for 1 minute. Just notice each inhale and exhale. And if you notice that you've stopped paying attention to it, come back to it. But 1 minute is doable. And then you don't feel like it's so much. Like I remember that from when I started, where it was like I wanted to do it for a half an hour the first time, and I was probably 3 minutes in and I was like, oh my God, it's been 3 minutes. It hasn't been a half an hour yet. Oh my God. And I was just like devastated that so that was like way more than I could handle. Kathy's dying.
Right.
I think Kathy's
Because
like,
that's
that's
her.
me. Yeah. So that is so normal.
Hmm.
We are, so starting smaller can help
Right.
from that regard. Um, but our soul is available in so many different ways. We've already talked about nature.
Right.
Another way that I get a lot of spirit communication, a lot of soul communication is through dreams. And some
Mhm.
people think that they don't dream, and you can train yourself to remember your dreams. One way to begin that is that if you write down as soon as you wake up, write down what you can remember from your dream. And it might just be a couple of sentences, but if you do it first thing, like before you even get up out of bed, because they're slippery, they're really slippery. And so you might think that oh, it actually says, I dream nonstop every night. I'm trying to stop mine. Well, maybe you're getting some good messages. So hopefully you're remembering and getting some symbolism in there. But that's another way because this, like we were talking about before, um, my experience has been a lot of times the spirit communication is not as literal as the way that we talk to each other and the way that
Right.
we communicate. A lot of it is symbolic. Um, a lot of it is like synchronicity. Synchronicity is
Mhm.
a huge way that spirit talks to us. And so noticing, and again, I mean, I know the question was like, what do you do to connect? But part of it is being intentional and noticing and
Mhm.
being in that communication of like, wait a minute, I was just doing this. So I had a fun one today. I had been a guest on somebody's podcast and I had it playing in the background because I was trying to load some information onto my website related to it. So I just had it like playing while I was doing other things. And I got to this part, and we had done this recording probably about 6 weeks ago. So I didn't even really remember a lot of the content. And I'm talking about how I was interviewing Cheryl Page. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Cheryl Page, but I was interviewing her, and she started talking about she just was giving this personal story off the cuff about when she lived in Santa Fe. And I'm like, Santa Fe? I'm about to get on a plane. Like the next thing I was going to do after I finished interviewing her was get on a plane and go to Santa Fe for the first time. And so I was talking on this other podcast about that. And it was also related to some other synchronicities that were coming in about Santa Fe, where I was like, why all of a sudden, like all these years, I've never been to Santa Fe. And now, like everywhere I turn, as I'm on my way to Santa Fe, like the book I'm reading is talking about Santa Fe and all of this. And so anyway, I start telling this story and I say Cheryl Page, and then my phone starts ringing and it's Cheryl Page. And I was like, oh, like I don't even say hello. I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe your timing. You will not believe the last words I just heard before my phone started ringing. And it was me. It was like I was looking in a funhouse mirror where it just goes like the repeated image all the way through as far as you can see, because there was just so much synchronicity happening. Even while I'm talking about synchronicity, the synchronicity is happening. So, but again, I see things from a geometric, like the foundation of all of my perception is geometry.
Okay.
And when we think about sacred geometry, it's repeating patterns. It's perfectly repeated patterns. And, I don't know how easy it is to see the geometry on my wall behind. I know you'll be missing this if you're just listening to the audio, but for people, it's kind of hard to
Yes.
see in this light. But
Mhm.
you can see that
Yeah.
there are six points in there. There are actually a
Mhm.
lot of different repeating geometries in that mandala, but that is another representation of synchronicity, where it's like, okay, well, one point on this modified Metatron's cube would be the first time that it, that I had that experience with Cheryl. And I was like, wait, you're telling a story about Santa Fe, and I'm just on my way to Santa Fe. And then another point on that is when I was on another podcast and I start talking about the synchronicity and how that related to that conversation with Cheryl.
Right.
And then another point on that is when I'm listening to that weeks later and she calls me the instant that I say her name again. And I'm talking about synchronicity and it's another. So it's like all of these repeating things that
Mhm.
help to illustrate, the nature, the geometric nature of reality. So there are all these different modes of communication of the bigger reality that we're a part of.
Mhm.
And I think that so there are there's so much variety for us here. There are so many different ways that we can connect and that we can strengthen that connection. And we can use what is innate for us, like what are we drawn to? So if we love nature and we want to live in the jungle and see it and be immersed in it and smell it and have it easily accessible just right on our back porch, then, that's a way that's going to nurture our soul, and we should lean into that.
Mhm.
And if we're really into meditation and that we feel that it helps us to connect, we feel that it calms us and that it really helps us to shift into a higher expression of ourselves, then that's available for us. If we feel more artistic or even like mathematical, there are both of those components. There's so many layers and levels with geometry. So maybe we want to interact more at the sacred geometry session. Um, so See, my last two sessions on Phil's Thursday sessions about excision. I'm not ex. How do you say that? Quantum Doug.
Existence.
Existons, geometric hyperbits. Oh,
Mhm.
okay. I'm gonna have to look into that. So, for
Yeah,
those
you're
of you,
talking about time and geometry. That's one of my specialties. So,
ah, oh,
so
okay. I'm gonna go find those. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm just, I was reading in the chat. Sorry for those. I know that there will be people watching the recording later,
They're
but
going like, what? Where did that come
yeah,
from?
like what is she talking about? So Quantum Doug was just saying, see my last two sessions on Phil's Thursday sessions about existons,
Yeah,
geometric hyperbits. Okay, I think that's for me. That's that's for
that's
me.
a
I
yeah.
can't wait to go learn about that. Yeah.
you keep talking to me as like this whole session is talking to me. So I decided I was only fair in this since you're essentially talking my language, I should talk back to your language. So
Oh, I love it. Okay, well, you're informing my vocabulary, so thank you. I'm going to learn some new stuff. I'm excited.
anything more on time and geometry, I'm all ears.
Oh, yeah, I didn't finish my do you want me to talk about the way I saw time?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, at the beginning of the interview, I was kind of talking about one of the experiences that I had where I quote unquote saw time.
Mhm.
And so the first time that this showed up, I was kind of floating through these different realms, and there were different levels of density. When I say that, it really was like when the experience started, when this metaphysical experience started, what I was seeing was very like colorful, it was very full, it was very vibrant. And as my awareness moved further out,
Mhm.
it thinned out. So like the visuals that I was getting, everything kind of started to thin out, and then it started to look like I was, I was perceiving that I was kind of like seeing through things almost, and seeing the structure within things, seeing like patterns, like some
Mhm.
where things just started to become more like lines, intersecting lines, and there was kind of a code element to it. It felt like code. It looked like a lot of intersecting lines, but the idea that came to me was like, this is code. I'm looking at code, but
Right.
it didn't look like the code that we would normally associate with. Eventually, I kept kind of going through these different realms and
Right.
things would change. And then at one point, I was like looking through to I thought I was in space at first. So it's just kind of black, void type of thing. But then I realized I was looking out to windows, and I don't know if they were hexagons or octagons. They were big, but they were like angular. And then there was this metal lining around it, like metal framing, and there was etching on it. And they were like symbols.
Right.
So maybe like star language or light language or something. I wasn't sure what the symbols were. I just noticed there were like these etchings on it. And then I was looking down on this, like it was like a spiral, but it had all these like blocks of different heights. And so almost like when you see a bar graph, you know how
Mhm.
there are like different bars and at different heights. So it was kind of like that, but they were arranged like a labyrinth. And I just could, I don't know if see is the right word. I perceived that wherever you put your attention in this labyrinth
Mhm.
was you would find yourself at a particular place and time. And so it was like almost like coordinates, but it didn't look like a graph or anything like that. And I was able to just zero in on where I was at that exact point in time. And it was like the reason that it was like an inversion of what you would think. Like I'm having this experience on November 4th, 2025 at 8:22 p.m. And this is what's happening at this point in time. But it was like the opposite of, oh, okay, I'm having that experience because I'm at that point in space time.
Mhm.
So I was like, oh, this is where I am in this point in time. This is why I'm having this metaphysical experience, because this was the time and place to have it. And then I was like, I wonder what happens if I go to a different part of this structure that I'm seeing. And so I like just jumped over to my left. And this was all happening like not physically. It was just in like I was actually intending to go to sleep. So this is in that hypnagogic state. People say it different ways.
Mhm.
And I jumped to the left, and suddenly I saw a girl that was about like 10, and there was this really heavy sky, a tall stone building. She was holding the reins of a horse, and there was like a big tree. And it was just kind of this moody atmosphere. And I was like, oh, I get it. You go to like a totally different time and place, because it also felt like it was about the 1800s, and or maybe it was the 1600s. I can't remember now. Like, but it was like at least a couple hundred years ago.
Mhm.
And so then I was like, oh, okay. You go to just a totally different time and place, because it also felt like Scotland. It was either like Scotland, Ireland type of thing. And then I left. I was like, okay, I get it. And then, but then like later I was like, I have so many questions now. Like, was that me? Was that a whole other like, you know, spiritual group? Was it just an imaginary, like, oh, this is an idea, just to kind of show the idea
Right.
that you can access really anything through this? The levels of the bar graph were also illustrating, because some of them were tall, some of them were short. And it was like all representing all the different levels of experience that are available in any given experience. So like here right now, we're all sharing this experience. We could have any number of experiences within this one opportunity of experience.
Right.
We could all be like really defensive with each other or suspicious of each other, or we could be like, oh my God, it's my family. I haven't seen you guys in so long. And we could be excited and inspired by each other. We could be bored or hungry or, blah or whatever it might be. And those are all available to us. And it's not necessarily like any of them are wrong, but it's just like if we want to have that, I mean, not that we would necessarily consciously choose a lower experience, but it's always there. And likewise, the higher experience is always there. And we can, even though that doesn't always feel like it's within our control, we do have it's all available for us. So we do have an element of control with how we show up and how we work with our emotions and so forth, and it all really comes down to vibration. So that was the first time that I saw time. And I'll just give one. Well, Glenda, do you want me to give one more
Sure.
example?
Go ahead, please.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Because I think my favorite of the ways that I've experienced time was the next one, which was I was in this void again. But it has a very space element, but I don't really like have a body in these types of things. So I was just like in space. Like again, I had moved through a lot of density where things just keep spreading out and getting more and more vapory and kind of seeing through things. And then they like turn into like, oh, okay, that's what's within that or underneath that or behind that. And then I found myself in space. And then I started like out of this space void, I started seeing like this kind of like these silvery kind of lines is how they were starting to show up. And then I realized it was this massive like sphere that was on its side, like vertical.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized it was gears. So like more,
Mm-hmm.
I like more and more started to come into focus, but it started with this massive one. And then I was like, oh, is that a gear? And then I could see that there were other ones, and there was this huge. I mean, it just looked like this machinery, basically, but like like just cogs,
Okay.
and so I was just watching that for a while, and I'm like, that's really interesting. And then I noticed this uh, this galaxy. It looked like this spiraling, rotating galaxy, which was interestingly, I shared earlier about the descending light. That was like my first like kind of supernatural experience in meditation. The second one was a spiraling galaxy in my inner
Mm-hmm.
sight. So during meditation, I started seeing this spiraling galaxy in when my eyes were closed, and I was like, why in the world would I see that? I was so confused. It was years later that I understood the role. Like, first of all, that ETs were real. I didn't even like think they were real then. Then that they had any role in spirituality, it took me years before I knew that. And then that I had any connection to any of that. So I was so like, that is the weirdest thing to see. Why on earth would I see that in my mind? Um, but anyway, so in this other experience, I was seeing this rotating galaxy, and I see that fairly regularly-ish. It's not unusual for me to see the spiraling galaxy. It's kind of the easiest thing that I perceive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they started intersecting because I thought I was seeing like one, like, because then my attention went to the spiraling galaxy, and I was like, oh, that galaxy, it's so beautiful. And I was kind of like looking down on it. Then they started to converge. And so it was like this galaxy and the gears started coming together, and they looked like an XY axis.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I mean, not a grid. It was like, vertical axis and a horizontal axis. And then then I could see kind of like from my own perspective that as like my human experience, I'm always moving on this XY axis of space time. And there's a Z axis. There's like it's a three dimensional. And that is coming through my eyes. So my eyes are projecting the Z axis out, out from the X and Y.
Mm-hmm.
And what I experience is related to my vibrational frequency. So again, there's that element of like, there are a lot of different ways that that Z axis will present itself because it's based on my own perception, but it's literally the light is bending from my eyes based on my vibrational frequency, which the bending of light thing, I still don't quite understand that. Like that to my rational human brain, I'm like, okay, like it kind of makes sense, but I don't really like understand the bending of light.
Right.
But that was part of it, where it was like your eyes bend the light and project reality, and that's based on your vibrational frequency, like the output that goes out, which is your lived experience.
Right. Well, we're so limited in our mind. We really are. Fortunately, we're made that way so we can learn how to expand.
Right.
Have an actual opportunity to do so. And can't wait
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
cannot wait till that moment to really get to that point where we could just totally expand and go back to those ancient civilizations where just it was just there was no need to even speak. There was no need to it just everything presented itself the way it should.
Yeah.
So when do we're over, but that's okay. Any questions? Any
I think
comments?
Quantum Doug was.
Well, just the comment
Yes.
is that most psychics don't describe such a sort of a structural geometric way of looking at things. So I applaud that because I think it's related to all that. So the fact that you're observing that, some people say that when I talk about existence, they say, yeah, I see a pixelated universe, and so it shows up as little pixels, and so, if you're interested in how science and spirit are connected, you want to talk to somebody with a scientific background, please reach out to me, so.
Yeah, I love that convergence.
Yeah, so that's my spot. That's what I do. That's my thing. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Susie, you had your hand up.
Yeah,
Yes.
I remember Kara at the beginning before we started, and I said I didn't know if I remembered you because you had seen me play music with Sheila a few years back. Well, I do, and I said, as soon as you start talking, I'll remember. As soon as you mentioned sacred geometry, I'm like, oh my God, because I studied with Drunvalo Melchizedek and what's his name, uh, uh, Nassim Harriman, but I studied with this group for 12 years. That you probably should look them up. I know that they're having difficulties, so but it's called the template.org, and they've got sacred geometry. It's just like
Yes.
Yes.
it's
Yes.
such a turn on. I would watch it for like 22 hours, these spinning geometries, and they're
Yeah.
healing different parts of
Very
our body.
activating.
Oh my God. And one more thing. Um, uh, uh, Anelia Benz about this thing with meditation. You take the pressure off, because she said if you've got an hour, you can get the same goodies from spirit by meditating for an hour, or doing absolutely nothing for an hour, or pretending for an hour. And I'm such a good pretender, When I was a kid, that's what my gig was. I mean, I wanted to get away from the abuse, and so I'd go in my bedroom and pretend and pretend. So I'm good at that. So yeah, make it easy on yourself when you're comfortable. And I'm learning this new meditation, and it's working so well to keep me immune that I'm like up doing it. I wake up early because when something works, you really want to do it. And by the way, Glenda, that's from Dawson Church. From his, I bought 4 of his books. His stuff is amazing. So yeah, Anyway, Kara, amazing. I love you. I remember you. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Come
Oh,
see me in Hawaii anytime.
oh, thank you so much. I really love that. And I'm so happy you brought up the temple website again because, or that you brought that up because it's probably been about a year since I looked into that and I got so much from it. And I remember thinking like I didn't need to do it again right away. Um, like I felt like I got what I needed with whatever it was that I did, but it feels now that you're bringing this up, I'm like, okay, I think it'd be a good thing to go back and review now.
Yeah, I went
Mm,
to 12 of their physical ceremonies in Berkeley and Oakland and different places. It was magic. It was
Wow.
absolutely magic, you know. So yeah, it's thetemplate.org. But I
Yes,
don't know
thank you.
how they're doing right now. I knew they were having some difficulties. They ran out of money and stuff, but I love you. You are so cool.
Oh, I love you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Uh,
well, thank you, Kara.
Thank you,
For
Glenda.
everyone here, just give out your website or where your book can be found. And
Yes, thank you so much. So my website is karagoodwin.com. I spell Kara with a K. Everything else should be easy. And my podcast is on soulelevationpodcast.com and all the regular places, YouTube and Apple and Spotify and all of that. And then my book is on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and it's called Your Authentic Awakening. And I'm around, so I'd love to hear from you.
perfect. Thank you very much. Very insightful chat, and hope everyone received what they were looking for. I want to thank the audience, whether you're here live or you're watching this later. I want to thank you all for supporting us and supporting our guests, which is important, so we could continue to spread this word out, so we could get out of those boxes that we've been put in all of our lives. All right, good night. Thank you very much. And as always, love you. Bye.
Thank you so
bye.
much.
Be
Bye,
good, guys.
everybody.